Over the past year and a half, you've probably seen big dramatic headlines about how real estate commissions work now and how the industry is being turned upside down. Those headlines are designed to create drama, capture attention, and trigger unnecessary alarm without actually explaining what happened. And more importantly, they don't tell you what it means for you if you're buying or selling a home. I still get asked questions about this on a regular basis. So today, I want to walk you through what actually changed in 2024, why it changed, and just as importantly, what didn't change. The impact was nationwide, so whether you're a buyer or seller here in Chicago or anywhere else in the country, understanding this helps you make better decisions. I'm Shireen, I'm a licensed real estate broker here in Chicago, and my goal with this channel is to give you educator-driven content about real estate without any hype. Let's break down this particular issue. In 2023, several antitrust lawsuits challenged long-standing practices in real estate. Specifically, they challenged how the buyer's agents were compensated and how that compensation was communicated through the MLS, the Multiple Listing Service, which is the online database for all active and archived listings. I don't want to bore you with the minute details of the case, as I want to focus on what is most important to my audience, how this affects you as a buyer or seller. If you want to learn more about the specifics of the case, just drop a comment, reach out to me, and I'm happy to walk you through the details. So the National Association of Realtors, NAR for short, ultimately reached a settlement that led to practice changes implemented nationwide in August of 2024. Whether or not you agree with the case that was presented and whether or not you're happy with the outcome is beside the point. The bottom line is the settlement happened and the industry adjusted by making some changes. Now, before I tell you what those changes are, I want to share this little story with you. When I started in real estate back in 2008, I quickly realized something didn't add up. I learned that sellers were paying both sides of the commission, both their agent's fee and their buyer's agent's fee. And being the critical thinker that I am, I immediately asked my manager, why? Why wouldn't each client just pay for their own agent? The answer I got was that they didn't want to burden the buyer with an additional cost, especially since the buyer was already bringing so much money to the table in order to purchase a home. That logic didn't make sense to me, and here's why. The seller was paying that commission out of their sale proceeds. And where did those proceeds come from? The buyer. So really, the buyer was already paying for it indirectly. It would have made more sense if the buyer simply offered a lower purchase price and then paid their own agent directly at whatever rate they agreed to, particularly since that cost can be financed. I didn't have a choice, so I put the matter to rest and I simply worked with the existing system. But looking back now, I realize I was asking the right questions all along. And now, with the 2024 NAR settlement, the industry is finally catching up. Now let's talk about the three main changes before we talk about what hasn't changed. First, compensation is no longer displayed in the MLS, the database I mentioned earlier. Sellers can still choose to offer compensation to a buyer's agent, and many still do, but it cannot be advertised or displayed in the MLS anymore. That information now exists outside the listing database. Second, buyers and tenants must now sign written representation agreements before touring homes. This one's a big shift. Before your agent shows you any properties, you now formally agree in writing on what services they'll provide and exactly how they'll be compensated. It's no longer informal or assumed. Third, commission payment is explicitly negotiable as part of each transaction. Now, in practice, this has always been true. Everything in real estate is negotiable, but the new framework formalizes that flexibility and provides several different options for how a buyer's agent gets paid. Those are the three big changes, and they sound significant, right? They are procedurally. Here's what you need to also understand about what hasn't changed. Homes are still priced based on market conditions. Negotiation still determines final outcomes. Supply and demand still drive leverage in any transaction. And most importantly, every transaction is still highly individualized. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to buying or selling real estate, and there never has been. The fundamentals of how real estate works haven't changed. What has changed is the process, specifically how compensation is communicated and documented. But the economics of a transaction are landing in very similar places to where they historically have. Let me tell you why this shift in practice is so much better for agents and their clients. It increases transparency. Buyers now have clear, upfront conversations about how their agent is compensated and what services they're receiving in return. That's a good thing. It encourages clear communication between agents and clients. No more assumptions, everything's explicit now. And it allows more customization in how deals are structured. For informed buyers and sellers, this creates more control over the transaction. The old system wasn't terrible, but it wasn't clear. This new framework forces clarity, and in complex transactions involving 6- and 7-figure assets, clarity from the start is a very good thing. So practically speaking, how does that new flexibility and clarity translate into real transactions today? For sellers, compensation can be a strategic lever instead of being a default line item. Buyers' agents' compensation is now part of a broader negotiation strategy. For example, you might choose to offer competitive compensation to attract a stronger buyer pool or to encourage more competitive offers. The goal hasn't changed. You want to maximize demand and protect your net proceeds. And now the tools to do that are more flexible. Now let's get to the buyers. Buyers are now required to have early, clear conversations about representation and compensation. Before you tour a single property, you'll sit down with your agent and discuss how they're compensated, what services and advocacy you're receiving, how your offers can be structured competitively. Especially in competitive markets, strong representation directly impacts your final outcome. A knowledgeable, experienced agent helps you avoid costly mistakes and navigate what is genuinely a multi-layered, complex transaction. Now, here's the reality that most people don't see. In many transactions across the country, including here in Chicago, sellers are still choosing to offer buyer agent compensation because it's a competitive strategy. If you want to attract qualified buyers and create urgency, offering that compensation can be a part of how you do that. So while the process has evolved, the financial fundamentals largely have not. Buyers still behave based on affordability and competition. Sellers still behave based on net outcomes and risk management. The 2024 NAR settlement changed how we communicate about compensation and how we document representation. It formalized transparency and flexibility, but it didn't fundamentally change the economics of transactions. In other words, buyer and seller bottom lines are still looking the same. Let me demonstrate what I mean by all this with a very simple, straightforward example. Say you're buying a home for $500,000 and your agent's commission is 3%, which is $15,000. Before the settlement, the seller would typically cover that cost and it would come out of their proceeds. After the settlement, you might offer $500,000 with the seller still covering your agent's commission, or you could offer $485,000 with your agent's $15,000 fee coming directly from you. The bottom line for both buyer and seller essentially stays the same. The numbers just get rearranged. Of course, real estate transactions are far more complex, and there are many fees involved. So if you want to walk through what those numbers actually look like in your specific situation, I'll be happy to talk through it with you. Just remember, markets are still driven by supply and demand. Pricing is still based on comparable sales data. Negotiation still matters. The changes have forced the industry professionals and their clients to have clear conversations up front. And as someone who believes deeply in education and transparency, I think that's a net positive. If you're thinking about buying or selling, whether that's this year or a few years from now, understanding these changes helps you ask the right questions, and it helps you understand your options. It also helps you work with an agent who can navigate these nuances strategically on your behalf. At the end of the day, real estate transactions are complex and layered. Having someone in your corner who understands those layers is very important. If you found this video helpful, like the video. Subscribe to the channel because I'm building a library of educational material for buyers, sellers, agents, and anyone who wants to understand how real estate actually works. I'm not just giving you headlines. And if you have questions about how any of this applies to your specific situation, drop them in the comments. I read every single one, and I'm always happy to help you think through your particular circumstances. Thank you for watching. I'll keep the camera rolling, and I'll always keep it real. I'll see you in the next video.